This episode of Love is a Life in Entertainment Media is with the blogger and influencer Simon Harris. Simon has done some brilliant work, and during the pandemic he drove 5 million people to social media accounts to make sure they were properly informed. Good morning to you, Simon.
Hi, how's it going, mate?
It's good. Now, is that an accurate description?
Do you know what? I just hate the word influencer with a passion because it makes it sound like I'm sort of wandering around taking black and white soft focus selfies in front of, jewellery shops and fashion shows. I mean, influencer these days gets a bit of a bad rap, but yeah, again, if I do influence people, then so be it.
Yeah, I think it's a general term, and you've been a force for good for a long time. So let's make that clear. There's nothing nefarious around any of your activities, and it's not about self-gain either, is it? At the end of the day, what you do is for the public good. But you're also a massive Arsenal fan, and you featured in some of their work online.
A while ago, yeah.
Where did it all begin for you, and how did you get into the world of blogging and basically doing the great work that you've done?
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me where did supporting Arsenal come from. Literally, my dad was born in a nursing home on the Avenel Road, I think it was, way back.
Oh, really?
That came from, yeah. So at least I'm not one of these glory hunters saying that there's not really much glory to hunt at the moment. But no, the whole blogging thing. I mean, I'm sort of going back to maybe 2015, maybe go back 10 years or more. I started a fake news stroke satire page called Southend News Network that I've kind of resurrected recently. So I think this is a good time to get back into that sort of piss-takey kind of thing now. And again, originally that was just to kind of mock, not so much to mock the local media and local councils, just sort of like, how there have been so many really successful hyper-local fake news kind of things in the past, like Family Examiner, stuff like that. And it's kind of like to, shine a light on the humorous side of local life. Unfortunately with that, you very quickly run out of jokes about Southend Pier and seagulls and Dartford Crossing. And so I just ended up using it as kind of satire for anything that was going on the day, fake news issues, politics. Because it always falls back to politics, doesn't it? It doesn't matter how far away you start from politics. You end up back on politics again because it touches our lives. This was back when Facebook wasn't heavily cracking down on satire and fake news. For instance, we were able to have some good successes with that in terms of getting very, very famous people to believe what was being published. And because I called it Southend News Network, which does sound like a half respectable news outlet, we had people like Katie Hopkins announcing live on LBC radio that the M25 was closing for a week for a running and jogging race.
No.
Yeah, that happened. And again, she issued a retraction about 3/4 of an hour later saying, actually, it wasn't real. I'm sorry. The Sun as well. We did something about a toddler wearing a cow onesie getting kicked out of a vegan's birthday party. And the Sun actually published it as a story, and it took about 3 hours for them to take it down.
Hilarious.
And the Sun journalist actually reached out to me and said, "Oh, hi, is it okay if we use your photos?" Like, yeah, go ahead. Fine, whatever. No sort of fee intended, that kind of thing. And again, the problem was obviously at the time, Facebook were willing for people to, as long as it wasn't malicious. And I don't think anything I did was ever genuinely malicious, even if sometimes things got interpreted one way or another. Yeah. But over time, I think with the referendum vote and Trump, everything like that, the social media networks started to think, actually, we're responsible for this stuff spreading. And so over time, and all of the other satire and fake news websites will say the same thing, it suddenly became very, very difficult to get eyes on content for any of that kind of thing. And so kind of the more time I was putting into it, the less I was getting out of it in terms of seeing it used. And so in the end, it all just kind of died a death and I moved on, unfortunately.
So what's your inspiration to start it again? I mean, we are in the doldrums when it comes to politics, aren't we? And all the news that's coming out today from the USA. And I suppose it's a good time to try and put some brevity into people's lives.
I think so. I mean, again, you run the risk with Facebook now. I mean, Facebook have announced recently they're going to start just putting community notes and fact checking on stuff instead of just banning people. Because I used to get a ban literally every couple of weeks I'd get a ban or a restriction for one thing or another to do with the algorithm and stuff like that. Now that they've announced they're moving back to just putting community notes on stuff and letting people make up their own minds, I thought, yeah, okay. I mean, I've got like a massive back catalogue of stuff that I'm generally punting out. I'm not forcing people to go to a third-party website now. It's all just on Facebook, because I think Facebook don't like you pushing people away from Facebook either, because obviously they don't get their pound of flesh then, do they, in terms of advertising and stuff like that. So keeping it all on Facebook just until I get banned again, basically.
Which is likely, isn't it?
Possibly. It depends what kind of sense of humour they've got these days. But again, if they're going to stick to their word truly and say you can post what you want, we'll just put fact check community notes on stuff, but we're not going to restrict people. Great, fine. You know, the fact is, if they're going to put fact check and community notes on a website that's clearly labelled as fake news and satire, then, you know, good luck to them.
Yeah. But what other platforms? You use Facebook, you use Instagram as well?
No, I don't really use anything except Facebook and Threads a little bit.
Right.
Because again, Instagram is very much photo centric, and I don't really take poncy photos of any. I mean, again, some people are very, very successful with Instagram, but I just never really got on with it. Or TikTok, for that matter. I can't make an interesting video to save my life. But again, saying that, Facebook are kind of pulling TikTok functionality in now in terms of Reels. Maybe I'll dive into that in the future. But again, you know, me having the sort of face for radio kind of, you know, dictates that I'll stick to my text on Facebook and photos and leave it at that.
It's interesting. I've breached the sort of the threshold of TikTok, and I've got quite a few people that watch my rubbish. But my biggest one was I complained about a train being 4 minutes late and cost me £22 from Stratford. From Whittam to Stratford, and that went bonkers.
Do you know what? And again, this is one of the most irritating things about social media in general. Is that I've always said, I mean, there are people out there who will literally pour their heart and soul into making a post. Yeah, they've spent hours on it. Could be anything, and it will literally be looked at for about 2 seconds and gone. Yeah, and yet sometimes, the throwaway stuff. You know, literally, I'll spend 30 seconds bashing something out, and it's got like thousands of reactions, and you think, well, it's just such a. It's like almost sometimes like an inverse relationship between the amount of effort you put into something and the impact it has on social media. And there's no kind of magic formula to it. I've had people come to me before and say, "Oh, hi, Simon, I've got this business. Can you do us a post?" And it absolutely has to go viral. I'll be like, "Well, I can't go and see that." No. I mean, every time people figure out the algorithms on any social media network, they tweak them because they don't want people figuring out the algorithms. They want people pumping money in an ad credit and stuff like that. Every time people get close to figuring out what Facebook actually wants, Facebook tweak it. So literally, there's no point. I mean, I see people having massive discussions about how can I get this viral, how can I boost reach, boost this, boost that. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason to it. It's literally just keep pumping stuff out, and occasionally something will take off. I mean, my biggest, downfall. I sometimes put so much effort into making loads and loads of posts over and over and over again, thinking, well, if you throw enough, what at the wall, some of it's going to stick. Yeah. But in fact, maybe sometimes I just need to sort of step back a bit and not post once an hour and actually get on with my life and go outside and smell some flowers sometimes. Yeah.
It is difficult, though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's literally the need hits me. I'll go, oh, quick post about that. Great. But sometimes I'll just go post and think, oh, just maybe step away from it sometimes and do something more worthwhile.
But it's part of our life, and it is your business, isn't it? At the end of the day, this is what you do for a living. I mean, it's a hard living as well, isn't it? It's not, you've really got.
It is a hard living and unfortunately there are people out there who try to make it as hard as possible, as you well know. Yeah. But again, my general feeling about it is social media has still been kind to me. Overall, even with all the shit that's happened, it's still been quite kind to me in general. So, of course, it's good to do stuff and use them and generally try and use my platform for good as well. It's kind of like a, yin-yang thing, as in you put something in, you get something out of it. For God's sake, put something in. Otherwise, it's going to end up biting you in the arse even harder than it has done already. So, yeah. Definitely.
No, I agree. And we'll come on to that. But and your Facebook account is Man Behaving Dadly. I mean, that's got That's your main one, but that's got a huge following, hasn't it?
Well, again, another fascinating thing about social media is, I think it's about 279,000 followers. But now having any amount of following is no indication of what you can expect a post in terms of reach and impressions and views. Because again, you'll find, people with only maybe a couple of thousand followers will have such a brilliant idea one day, it will just fly. It's just the way it is. I mean, again, over time, it all evens itself out, and the bigger following you've got, the better. But I mean, again, it makes me laugh sometimes. We say, well, we've got 279,000 followers, or well, we've got 500,000 followers, and you go on the page, and the posts maybe look like they're doing just as well as somebody with a couple of thousand. So yeah, it's absolutely no guarantee. It's more just a cosmetic number. It's more just the reach and impressions. And again, I've had some absolute abuse for various times for me saying, well, this post has reached X amount of people. And they'll go, yeah, but it's just a number. It's like, yeah, but if you're running a Facebook page, what other metric do you have of success other than people that see your content? I mean, we don't get anything out of it. We don't get green shield stamps next to points, whatever. It's literally however many people see your post, that's how successful the post is, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've got a very small following, but because you can go onto the professional dashboard, I could see that in the past 28 days, 60,000 people have looked at the... Now, that doesn't reflect my following by any stretch of the imagination, but 60,000 people they're the impressions, they're the people that it's actually reached. So
this is weird. I explain that to people until I'm blue in the face sometimes, because again, if I'm again, we'll talk about the other stuff in a minute. If I'm working with an organisation, all I can go back to them with is say, look, this post reached X amount of people. However many people did something with it, well, that's their thing, because I can send people to an organisation, like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's that kind of thing. Well, they've seen the content, they've clicked on this link. Beyond that, what am I responsible for other than getting eyes on content? If I'm publishing a newspaper, I'm only interested in how many people are reading it, necessarily. Yeah. Everything else is just someone else's deal.
But and you're right, because when the postman drops the mail through the letterbox, and the high percentage of it is, they call it junk mail, but it's what you and I do through social media. We're trying to drive people into a particular area. A very small percentage actually buy that bin cover or whatever it may be that they're trying to get through. But the post office have done their job. They've delivered it to somebody's front door, and that's what you've done.
We had this. Again, just to pluck one example out of thin air, when we were doing the COVID stuff. We'll talk about that anyway. But again, there was an element of the local NHS being involved in that as well, and they wanted eyes on. They just wanted to drive people to a survey about phlebotomy. I think that's the right word. So blood testing units. Yeah. Again, it was like, okay, we put a link in a bit of content, and a good few hundred people saw our post and clicked the link to go to the content. And then somebody asked me, but how many people actually filled in the survey? I'm like, well, I don't know. I wasn't hosting the survey. I was just sending people to the survey. Yeah. And they came back to me and said, well, how can we find out? It's like, well, you ask them. As in sort of, people really need to get a clear idea. If you're running a Facebook page, you're responsible for the Facebook page and sending people to whoever else in the business or wherever in the organisation it may be.
Yeah, absolutely right. You've been called unkindly a prankster. I mean, you have pulled a few strokes. I mean, I've read some of them, and they are hilarious, mate. I mean, some of the things that you've done to drive people, but you're very how do I describe it? You're a social media philanthropist, aren't you? Because at the end of the day, what you do is you are, because you try and raise monies and you try and bring the best out in people. But you've used some brilliant tactics in order to do that, haven't you?
Yeah, it's just my bone of contention with the way I have never called myself a comedian. To the best of my knowledge, I've never called myself a prankster. If I have, it's entirely in a self-deprecating manner. My issue is that it's now been twisted into saying, well, why have you employed this prankster? Why have you hired this prankster to do what I did? It's like, well, no. It was creating social media content and getting people to look at it, especially over COVID when, Jesus, did we need possibly a slightly lighter touch to get people reading very, very serious, important information. But the way that everything has now been packaged, it's like, why have you paid this prankster to do it? And the implication is there, even that I have pranked a public body into employing me. It's like, well, no, that's just clickbait headline grabbing. You know, that's not.
Yeah, it is.
That's not putting together what happened. I was asked to do stuff because I create content and people look at the content. I'm not pranking people into doing anything, but because obviously prankster gets paid $500,000 makes a much better headline than social media content creator paid an average of 93 grand a year for 4 years to create content. I mean, that's just a wordy headline. That doesn't get people in and get people foaming at the mouth. And this is now the issue I've got. And I could explain 1,000 times till I'm blue in the face, but you know, people just don't want to listen. So,
well, I think they do, because I mean, look, let's talk about that. March 2020.
Yeah.
5 years ago, we are thrown into a pandemic, aren't we?
Yeah.
And the world, literally the world changed. We were in a position where we had no information. What we didn't know was being made up, and what we needed is clear guidance and guidelines around what we needed to do. So you are then employed with the number of people to undertake the social media element of this for Essex County Council.
I mean, again, I use the word employed as well. It was never, strictly speaking, employment. It's more of a social media collaboration. I was contracted, maybe, and again, that sometimes gets misconstrued. Oh, yeah, I was basically contracted by. I mean, it all starts off with a phone call. I'm sat. I can actually remember where I was sitting. I was sat in the McDonald's drive-thru at Rayleigh Weir.
Yep.
As where I can be found quite often, actually, as it happens. Phone goes off. It's my main contact at Essex County Council saying, look, this is coming down the line. We need to get something in place. And I've done some work with Essex County Council before on certain public health stuff, some small bits about oral health, and like a kindness project as well, talking about community projects and getting people to look at social media content about it. I said, look, can we put something together, knowing that there was and again, this isn't just one person at Essex County Council, you know, going off the reservation, so to speak. A lot of people at Essex County Council were aware of the work that I'd done and colleagues had done. So this isn't just come from one person, it's come from a whole department, you know, no matter what you may read or hear. And I said, look, can we put together a social media project quickly, because speed is of the essence. Yep, fine. Yep. Essex Coronavirus Action, the page was born. Essex Coronavirus Action, the group was born. I never got involved much in the group, but we were working with some very, very talented community managers. Because the problem was twofold. A page gets the information over in manageable little chunks, basically. And a group allows people to discuss guidelines, because there was so much confusion. And every time people finally got their heads around a COVID guideline, Boris Johnson gets up on stage with the two guys either side of him. Names evade me now. That's good, isn't it? But anyway, they get up on stage, and all of a sudden the guidance changes, and there are 1,000 questions about that. And the people who are working in the group, you know, are literally dealing with hundreds upon thousands of questions from people who just, they're so frantically trying to figure out: am I vulnerable? Am I not? Should I be getting a food parcel? Should I not? Is it Christmas as normal? Is it not? And so again, it's a massive operation, but at the same time, there's a difference. A page gets the information out, as in, there you go, chew on that, basically. A group has this two-way interaction, and the two elements complemented each other incredibly well, because so many people were joining the group to get their own questions answered, and then they turn into question answerers, so to speak, as well. Because again, with all the will in the world, a group admin and their team cannot answer every single question. It's just not possible sometimes when hundreds are coming in. So obviously we're growing the page, driving more people into the group. Talented people in the group dealt with that thing. My sole job was to get government information and local NHS information and package it as memes. And that's because all people paid attention to were memes. Yeah. So many people, and I've been asked the question over and over again. Oh, others say, no, this is the issue. I've not been asked the question, but others have. Well, couldn't Essex's own comms department have done it? And in my opinion, they possibly couldn't have, because the whole point of our thing was getting people to look at information who would see an official government or local authority or NHS page and go, yeah, whatever, I'm not going to listen to them. Again, we were hitting people that they were not able to hit. And the whole point was, we do our thing, they do theirs. We're not there to replace anybody. God, no. you know. But again, the way things worked out over time, not enough people really understood what we were doing, I think, to really form a proper opinion about it. But there you go.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I was reading it up earlier on, and dare I say, some of the councillors who have been vocal around this area, they wouldn't know how to turn a Facebook account on, let alone criticise the way that it's run.
My biggest gripe, well, I'll say my biggest gripe, there were a few gripes. And again, I've always been very upfront about what I did wrong, which I'm sure we'll come to that soon. I've been very upfront about what I did wrong in terms of a lack of judgment in good faith, in my opinion. We'll get onto that in a minute. But, you know, councillors afterwards, there's been an official, what's it called, Audit, Governance and Standards Committee, for want of a better word. It's their own internal investigation where, A, we weren't even properly invited to attend it, which I think is absolutely unforgivable. I was invited to give some stats. Some of the stats didn't exist. I was asked for how many unique page views did you get per month? I was like, well, unique page views, that's not really a metric on. I was like, well, how many unique page? We know how many people visit a profile, but even then, that's a crap metric, because how many people go out of their way to look for a profile? Everything comes into your newsfeed, you see it. And these are the people acting as judge, jury, and possibly executioner on me and my colleagues, and we're not even afforded the opportunity to turn up and answer questions, which I said to their head of legal at Essex at the time, look, maybe mentally I'm not in a place where I can come in and get scrutinised, but give me a questionnaire and I will answer it honestly and openly. And as time went on, I'm thinking, well, actually, I could answer questions, just please have us up there. Never happened. But we had people on the committee confusing a page and a group, which again, it's only a minor thing, but it's not. When these people are passing judgment and they can't even get that right, it's just horrendous. And again, I was told all along, don't worry, Simon. Don't worry, Simon. This is not an investigation into you. This is an investigation into Essex County Council's conduct. I was like, come on, seriously. When you've got councillors going, Simon this, Simon that, blah, 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 that's not going to really hold much water. And in the end, I managed to shoehorn my statement into page 700 million of some PDF that no bugger's going to read anyway. They afforded me that courtesy, at least, to be published alongside the official report. But other than that, they never had me or any colleagues in to answer what actually happened. It was literally just, Tories bad, boo, they commissioned this. And people are just trying to make political capital out of it without really ever getting my side of things. And that's what really grinds me.
And the whole thing has been subject of scrutiny, hasn't it? It's been, in fact...
As it should be, yeah.
So, and some of your colleagues have faced other levels of scrutiny, and they've come out exonerated around anything that took place.
Which, I mean, it's not so much they've been... It's literally, I think, because I've got more of a public presence than some of the people that I work with who also earned or were paid, not insignificant sums of money to do it. But because they've not got a public profile, there was very little press interest in reach. I mean, the people in the press that got to touch me were like, hey, Si, can we have a phone number for X, Y, and Z? It's like, well, no, sod off. No, sorry. I mean, if they don't want to talk, as angry as I am, I'm not doing your job for you, and I'm not going to, rat them out. But again, when you look at, and again, all the information's online. Essex have published a massive, well, not massive, they've published a considerably large document online showing payments made, everything that basically happened, how the work was commissioned, and yet nobody actually wants to read it. It's bizarre. No. Again, there's a whole list of, as I've said all along, my biggest mistake was agreeing to, and again, it sounds a bit Father Ted here, like, cash resting in my account, but it's just kind of to administer payments for others. And again, I was basically given the impression, not just by one person at Essex, 4 different people contacted me to authorise these payments. So again, if people just want to say, well, they were 2 of them in cahoots. No, a whole 4 different people at Essex were asking me to make payments. But I was given the impression that it would be part of my contracted role to administer these payments for other people. At the time, nobody said to me, hey, Si, if you do this, your name's going to be on a spreadsheet for the whole world to see, and it will say Simon Harris, 100 grand, Simon Harris, 50 grand. Again, saying that, I'm a big boy, but I could have looked into it first and said, oh, maybe this isn't a good idea. But again, I said, yeah, I'll do it in good faith. It's the pandemic. This stuff needs to happen. And again, I fully hold my hands up afterwards and say, look, I should not have done that. And again, Essex County Council have said it was wrong and extremely wrong and regrettable, which again, I thoroughly agree with. But again, that was done to the best of my knowledge in good faith. The issue is, you see a headline anywhere, prankster paid $500,000. Well, no, because any figures you see, 163,000 of that were payments to other individuals that Essex told me to do. And this all went to I think the term is counter-fraud investigation. It sounds...
Yes.
But again, it basically is a scary-ish thing where an hour and a half I sat with counter-fraud officials, investigators, whatever, and literally went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. They never got back in touch with me to tell me how that turned out either, which, again, I think is horrendous. But, again, they just said to me, well, Simon, what would you expect to happen if you just run off with the money that you'd been paid? I said, well, I'd expect Essex to come after me with their fullest possible arsenal of tools to make me do what I was supposed to do. And, again, it's just a whole good faith thing. Everything was on paper. Contract, and again, the Liberal Democrats have decided to say that everything was based on all contracts, which has now gone out in a leaflet to the entire county. That's the subject of my complaints at the moment. Because again, well, hang on a minute, all the contracts are published online, all 25 of them. So how can you say that?
That is a complete untruth, and you've made a complaint about that.
Again, I'm going to be careful here because it's the subject of a complaint. The exact wording of the leaflet says all contracts were preferred. So again, maybe they've been a bit, snidey about it. All contracts were preferred. Well, no, they weren't. But again, it's just the Simon Harris show again, because I'm the only person named in this leaflet, and they've published another leaflet saying, we've not, Essex County Council haven't got funding for potholes, SEN support, which pissed me right off because my son's autistic, and they're trying to drag that into it. SEN support, bush maintenance. They listed this big group of things that are council tax budget related, and yet 82% of any money that was paid to me was from central government pots, specific for, there was comp for tackling the pandemic, there were public health budgets, stuff like that. 82% of what I was paid, to the best of my knowledge, didn't even come from council tax budgets.
No.
But yet again, all this information is online in a big spreadsheet on the ECC website. But again, they're saying, well, this cash-strapped council are putting up council tax and they're paying this guy £500,000. It's like, well, hang on a minute. If you actually look at your own information, and again, they keep saying, well, no, councillors are not the same as the council. Jesus Christ. Again, all this, blah, blah. But again, there are real-world consequences for the people that get caught up in it.
Yeah,
and again,
absolutely.
They've basically printed this stuff. And again, they might come back to me whenever the process is over saying, look, we printed that article in good faith based on the information we've had. So, well, no, you can't, and they've said similar things in full council as well. It's like, fine, you're going to say this stuff about me, yet you would not allow me to come in to answer questions as part of the official investigation. How is that democratic or fair? Again, their excuse is, well, it's an investigation into Essex County Council. It's like, well, and not you. It's like, yeah, but great, but inevitably, I'm going to get dragged into it.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
But you know as well as I do that everything that they can hide behind whatever they like, but the fact is that the evidence that they're relying upon is actually available to them. So there's no reason for them to make mistakes. As you say, there are 25 contracts that are well published.
And not just for me, but for everybody involved in the project.
Yeah.
And again, this has obviously now made it into private eye as well. And we're just starting to piece together that maybe, just maybe, and again, I'm not going to name names, but maybe, just maybe, there is some sort of correlation between councillors spouting horseshit and private eye spouting the same horseshit.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a hijacked collaboration page spouting the same horseshit and reprinting private eye, all these things. It's all very, very conveniently happening in the same kind of hemisphere.
Yeah, I mean, I personally believe that there is somebody in the council that is feeding private eye, and I believe that there's somebody in the community that is feeding the councillor that's feeding private eye. And I mean, I've seen some of the posts that are against the work that you did, and it's vile. It is absolutely. I mean,
again, I need to be clear when I say this, because I don't read, again, social media sites, it's bad. There are some third-party forums where it's beyond bad, where, again, people can just hide behind an anonymous profile and print whatever they want. with very, very little consequence. And unfortunately, and I disappeared from social media for a few months, as you're probably aware, which again was also a massive error on my part. I should never have done that. But again, I was literally cold sweats in the middle of the night, heart palpitations, waking up, soaked in sweat, and thinking, like, if I don't just step back, something's going to happen. I've got like 4 kids at home. People are punting my address around as well. So there were some public records to do with some old bits and business stuff and all kinds of stuff. I'm thinking, if I don't step back from it, something really horrible is going to happen. But I should not have stepped away from social media for as long as I did, maybe, and just literally tackled it head on. But I just couldn't do it. Like an idiot, I thought, do you know what? I'll just give the press a statement and they'll get my side across. Jesus. But the main reason why I did step away is I was basically handed some information saying, look, an element of the people that have been doing this, they've admitted being involved with certain other areas, like proper dark web stuff, areas and forums where one of the main reasons for the forum existing is to encourage social media personalities to take their own lives.
Yeah.
Again, I never saw actual examples of them being active on, and I'm not talking about stuff you can find on Google, I'm talking about proper dark web stuff.
Yeah.
But again, just seeing the admission of involvement was enough. It's like, right, that's it. Fuck it. I'm just going to step back. Sorry.
That's all right.
But that's it. I'm just going to step back for a few months, because seeing that involvement, saying, yeah, that admission of involvement with dark web stuff where people, and again, there are, if you look in the news, there are people that have been, I'm not going to glorify it by naming the forum, but there are instances where activity on this dark web, and they keep having to change servers and change hosts because people keep booting them off, have taken their own lives because of the organised harassment on there. I'm thinking, I'm not going to let that happen to me. And I still hope it doesn't happen, for Christ's sake. But again, that was enough to tip me over the edge and say, right, get off social media, so this is not doing you any favours.
But why do people glorify in bringing misery to other people's front doors? I don't understand it.
There's a reason for it. There is, again, I believe, for all the perceived wrong that I've done, there is a bigger motivation with some other people that might have been involved in the project, and I've been dragged into that. Again, I've sort of made enough enemies from everything I've done anyway in the past. I'm not going to pretend that's not happened. But again, I think I might have been caught up in something slightly bigger. I don't want to go into massive detail about it because there are processes now in play, as you're aware, to try and get to the bottom of it. But I think something else has happened in this hemisphere. Sorry, I keep saying that word. In this, world, so to speak, social media-wise, and the sectors that we've all been working in. I think I've been dragged into that.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, there needed to be scrutiny of what I did, absolutely. But the way it's happened and the way it's gone about, and the way I dealt with it, I could have possibly spoken to the media a lot sooner, done interviews, everything like that. I just couldn't do it. I could have handled it a lot better, but at the same time, I need to tackle it now because it keeps cropping up again and again. Not on a massive level, because again, somebody said to me the other day, one of these threads I've been reading about discussion, there might be like 50 odd people talking about it, and the UK has a population of 60 million odd people. Like, yeah, I know, but the problem is it's there, and people will find it on Google. And so if I can basically never work again with anybody who wants to work with me, I need to obviously tackle it, because this stuff's always going to crop up, and it still crops up now.
Yeah,
I've got to try and tackle it head on and see what happens.
Yeah, because you know as well as I do, if people do due diligence, which they do when they engage social media experts, then it's one of those things that's always there. And
one of the other things that's been levelled at the council is they didn't do due, whatever with me. It's like, well, hang on a minute, who am I? ISIS? So what's going on? I just make memes for a living.
Yeah.
I'm not some kind of illicit body who could bring serious harm to millions of people. I just spend most of my day, I was sat on the toilet churning memes out on my phone, trying to get like a point across. I'm not some kind of dangerous entity that a lot of people seem to believe I have been. It's just something's up. And I think the real people, the real people that have the issue with what we've done do not have the bollocks to use a public face on it. They have to hide behind counter-fraud whistleblowing and fake forums. They haven't got the bollocks. They'll just put some stuff out there and then let everybody else just hop on it. Like, when we talk about stuff like the Southport riots last year, and very prominent social media accounts, identifiable accounts, were dog whistling, sharing crumbs of stuff, knowing full well they weren't going to go out and start throwing bricks at hotels. But if they publish it, enough people did go out and start throwing bricks at hotels.
Yeah.
Again, this is a much smaller level, and I'm not playing down, certain stuff that happened elsewhere. But again, the people that have really got a problem with what we've done don't have the grapefruits to come out and just say it themselves. They will just put stuff up anonymously and let others do their work for them. And that's what we're trying to piece together now.
Yeah, you see, I'm a man who would, if I had something to say, I'd come round and knock on your door, or I'd phone you up or do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hide behind, and that's to my detriment sometimes. But I cannot abide cowardice. When I look at some of the individuals that are involved in this, they've never dealt with an angry person. They've never had to do things that. And they're just cowards. The individuals that reside in Southwood and Ferris that are behind some of this vitriolic behaviour, they are cowards. And
just say that's your opinion. That's not mine.
Yeah, no, that's.
I'm saying that's from what you've found so far. That's from your own.
That's from what the research that I've undertaken. They are cowards. They wouldn't come and speak to me personally. In fact, if I walked into a room with one of them, they would walk away because they haven't got the courage they were born with.
But this is the issue, isn't it? If I was to say I know exactly who, I know X, Y, and Z have done it. If I now went round, they're all guns blazing, fear. Not obviously bang bang, but I mean,
yeah.
Like Tonto on them. Well, it'd be me getting arrested, not them.
Yeah, so absolutely.
It's all just about following due process and whatever that may be. But again, if you've got a problem, just
tell me. Yeah.
Just, seriously, you've got a problem with it. Come and have a chat. All right, you see me out and about. I mean, again, this is quite an interesting thing as well. All this awfulness, especially when it kicked off last January 2024, and the press were involved. And it's quite disappointing, actually, press-wise. And again, I will actually talk to certain press outlets now in the mainstream media, with the exception of a local title who decided to actually actively collaborate with an element of what I was discussing earlier, which again, that's done it in for me completely.
Yeah.
In terms of their report writing. For all the horribleness online, not one person saw me. And again, I was trying to keep out and about. I was generally, because obviously you've got 4 kids going to clubs and whatever, got to get them all to after school clubs and doing the shopping and just generally getting on with my life. But nobody came up to me and said, "Oh, how dare you? I've read the stuff. You're an absolute arse." All this stuff, All right, I was getting it online in inbox, but nobody was coming up to me in the street. And again, even to this day, a couple of months ago, it's so funny. I just went out for dinner, the kids and my parents. Somebody was walking out the restaurant, and very loudly, but obviously they didn't realise I could hear him. Just said, "Oh, there's that knobhead Simon." You know what I mean? And again, it's funny now, but that's literally the only real world nastiness I've had about it all.
Yeah.
In the last 15 months or so.
That's bizarre.
It's bizarre, but again, it's very telling. And again, maybe I'm just reaping what I sow, because I sit on social media trapping off about X, Y, and Z. I try not to do it in a malicious manner, but again, sometimes things get taken the wrong way and I make mistakes and I take content. Again, I've put stuff up before and I've taken it off. Thinking, shut up, mate, you're being a dick, and I'll take it offline. Fine, yeah. I thoroughly admit to that. I word stuff in a clumsy manner sometimes, and I don't realise how clumsy it is, and then I take it off. But of course, by then somebody screenshotted it and they turn it into a big thing. I said, look, apologise, I shouldn't have said that. And I've said stuff before, and again, to my own detriment, I'll try and get an opinion across sometimes without actually having much insider knowledge about what I'm spouting about. It's just social media. But again, one person has made one throwaway comment within earshot in the last 15, 16 months. That's it. I've had no threats of violence or whatever, just people coming up to me and the finger in the chest, nothing like that, which I'm quite surprised about, because some of the press headlines to begin with were hysterical, especially when the Daily Mail and GB News got involved and this, that, and I thought, oh God, someone's going to get a tin of beans in my skull when I'm walking around Tesco or something. I was like, no, absolutely nothing happened other than that one throwaway comment in a pub restaurant in Southend. That's it, which I'm quite surprised about.
But you see, the thing is, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? I'm playing devil's advocate here, because we live by the sword and die by the sword, don't we? Because when we make sarcastic comments or call people out. I try and be kind the way that I call people out, but nevertheless, I won't shy away from it if I think it's the right thing to do. So sometimes, you've got to get. I did a video which I talk about, and 2 million people have watched it on Lad Bible.
Oh yeah.
And all. I mean, I got a load of abuse on it because I was a fat, wearing a pink tie. That was all that they could say to, yeah. That was just honestly.
Do you know what? I mean, again, as loathed as I am to quote Margaret Thatcher, the whole thing, like a. What's the saying? Like a stopped clock, a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah.
And Margaret Thatcher's quote about, as soon as they resort to personal, if they resort to personal insults, they have not a political argument left. And as loathed as I am to quote Thatcher, that was bang on, basically.
Yeah, but absolutely, absolutely. I don't know, mate. But I mean, so. Yeah. What is? Let me ask these questions. What is a meme? Because there'll be people listening to this and say, because you've mentioned the word meme. What is a meme?
Yeah, good question. My understanding of a meme, it's just a single bit of text or an image that gets a point across that maybe you're not using it for its original purpose. Like, for instance, there's some fantastic groups out there based on Father Ted and other TV shows where they take a line from Father Ted or Phoenix Nights or whatever, and they think, hang on, that's a really relevant line in terms of something that happened now. Like, for instance, Dermot Morgan, who died all those years ago, he said something that all of a sudden in 2025 in the news becomes massively relevant and pertinent, and they'll sort of turn a quote into an image based on it.
Right.
They might edit some of the text. And that's all a meme really is. It's just a little throwaway thing that gets a point across, maybe not the way it was originally intended. For instance, the famous one of there's famous meme images that get used, like the bloke and his girlfriend are walking along, and then he turns his head to look at another woman walking past and makes a ooh face like that. When suddenly you're doing something, but something else looks more, more appealing. Or there's another one with the girl smiling into a camera sinisterly with the house burning down behind her. And these are all, when they were originally published online, they had no idea that it was going to get reused millions of times. Right. And that's how meme culture takes off. Like Game of Thrones, for instance, the winter is coming. I forget the character's name, but he's going, winter is coming, wearing all of the, finery. And all of a sudden it turns into basically every time leading up to poppy season and remembrance, it gets turned into, oh no, they're banning poppies, idiots are coming, that kind of thing. Right. So that's what a meme is. And that's when early in the pandemic, a number of people within Essex County Council realised that maybe because it was absolutely horrendous subject matter, but if people weren't listening to the broadcast on TV or reading the official guidance, maybe they'll listen to it if we turn it into a meme. And that's what we were doing. We were taking really horrible, nasty topics and bringing in meme culture. And then sure enough, people were actually reading it, which was the whole point. I mean, again, best example I've got of that is I was over the Easter weekend, very early on in the pandemic. I was talking about April, Easter bank holiday weekend, where the government advice was go out for your daily exercise, but don't travel miles to do it. As in, this isn't a time for a day at the seaside. This is a time for staying somewhere near your house. So, of course, people were driving to Southend and parking up. They were going to Clacton, Promenade Park in Malden, put big signs up saying, are you local kind of thing? And if you're not, bugger off, basically. But again, Essex Police put a very serious, because again, Essex Police can't go into the jokey stuff too much, can they? No. They have to be, and they get abused. It doesn't matter what the police put on social media. They just assume that all the officers are sat in a room all day making memes and not on the streets. It's absolute horseshit. Shit. But Essex Police is a very serious post saying, look, we've got officers out on patrol on seafront locations. They may ask you if you're from the area. If they detect you've come from too far away, you risk getting a fine because they're trying to stop the spread and all that. Yeah. So I thought, right, that's the important message. What can we do? So we invented a cartoon seagull called Barry, the angry seagull. And the reason he's angry, Barry, is because he's not been able to dive bomb chips for the last month because everyone's been at home. So he's not had his chips, his ice cream, fish, whatever. But right, these seagulls, he's got friends, he's got cousins in Clacton and Frinton and whatever, and they're all so angry that if you risk going to Southend this weekend or wherever, or Frinton, Walton on A's, there's a chance you're going to get dive bombed by the angriest of angry seagulls. and a fine from Essex Police is going to be the worst of your. It's going to be the least of your worries. All this jokey stuff. And again, in terms of reach, more than 1 million people saw this one meme over bank holiday weekend.
Wow.
People are referencing it in other parts, because don't forget as well, it's Essex coronavirus action. But as far as I'm aware, we might have been the only local authority-backed thing doing this. There might have been others, small ones elsewhere. But again, people in Cornwall were talking about it, in Scotland and all these other places. Like, oh, wow, that's a really good idea. And we even heard about somebody printing it out in Malden and sticking it in their window on one of the roads leading down to the prom. Just all this kind of hilarious stuff coming out of it. But again, the message was stay near your house.
Yeah. The
issue we've got, obviously, and again, I'm going off on a tangent again. The issue we've got is anything to do with the pandemic now. It's like, you're 3-0 down before kickoff. Because obviously there's been so much mismanagement around the pandemic, even to an extent in our thing that I've already spoken about. I can't talk for Essex County Council behind the scenes because I don't know nothing about that. I make memes. That's it. But even in central government, there have been so much horrendous stuff coming out since then about Partygate and whatever the government got up to higher up, that anything to do with the pandemic now, you are 3-0 down before kickoff, as in it doesn't matter what you do, everything's crap, everything's rubbish, how dare you, you're an arsehole. There's that kind of quick... People are now completely unwilling to look at the facts. And again, the really funny thing was, at times, we even used our government-funded platform to not criticise what the government were doing, but to apply a critical eye to it.
Yeah.
Because, again, all along we had to say, look, if we take the government side more than the people's side, it's going to fall flat on its arse and not work. So we said, look, at times we've got to, without being abusive, we've got to just get people on side. And so, for instance, when Boris Johnson stood up and effectively cancelled Christmas a few days before it was going to happen, I think it was 2020, the whole thing was, you're going to get 2-3 days, whatever, to mingle with family. And very, very quickly, it became clear that maybe was not the best idea. But by then, he'd already announced it was going to happen. It was like, yeah, Christmas with the family, finally. And yet certain parts of the UK, including Essex, it wasn't going to happen because the infection rate was so high.
Yeah.
And again, so we thought, right, we've got to get this message out, but we cannot just say, look, the higher-ups have decided, just deal with it. No, we said, look, and the exact word we used in the meme was, we know this is crap. We said, look, how else are we going to get it? We know this is crap, but this is why it's happening. And so even at times, and even when the Partygate stuff came out in the press, we used our page to say, look, we want to obviously thank the people that have done the right thing. We know there are people that have not done the right thing. But we want to thank the people of Essex for trying to do the right thing. Because, again, we said, look, if we constantly take their side over the public side, no one's going to pay any attention to us. And that's what we just tried to do as best we could with the tools that we had, basically.
But you see, if you look at it from a reach, money perspective, if you pay for adverts on Meta... you pay a lot of money in order to get to 1,000 people, let alone get into 5 million people.
Again, another gripe of mine is that official evaluations of the work have been completely disregarded. And I'm quite prepared to even say this now, actually. And nobody else knows this, but I've been sat on it for a few days thinking this isn't right. We actually got a chance a few days ago. We were invited to get our work properly evaluated for a second time by NIHR, who are like the government. They're a government-funded body. There's NIHR, then there's another sub-part of that called it's all like a load of acronyms, but basically they are funded by government to evaluate and a proper critical eye to projects like ours. And there was another opportunity came up for local authority non-NHS health interventions. I thought, well, that's us to a T. They evaluated us before, but that only really covered the first half of what we did. And I was like, oh, bloody hell, this is great. Finally a chance to maybe get our side of this. And again, NIHR, if they thought something was awful, they'd tell us. They wouldn't just,
They wouldn't come back.
They wouldn't, they would come back and say this was good, this was bad. If there was a problem with it, they'd tell us. So I said, look, this is great. Unfortunately, though, the expression of interest has to come from the local authority. Now, we still speak to people within Essex, obviously just for administrative, but said, look, I'm really up for this, and it could do so much good in light of everything that's happened over the last 16 months. Please, can you express an interest? And they said no. Their reasoning being, well, they've already done the evaluation and there wouldn't be any appetite to do it again. I was like, okay. Well, again, that's their reason for it. But I was saying, so then I said, look to NIHR, could we organise maybe getting it evaluated from us? They said, no, it has to come. And again, they've got to follow their process because it's government funded. But I'm thinking, okay, so why not have it all looked at, the whole thing as a massive project over the 4 years or whatever? The collaboration lasted until, I think it was a 4-year thing in the end. It sort of elapsed the end of March 2024. Get it all looked at critically by these like the academics who look at it. When you look at the previous one, you know, they go through everything with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah,
they look at costs, they look at reach, they even interview people that were involved in it. They interview group members. They do statistics about how much more likely were you to follow the guidance, how much less likely. So again, any shortcomings are quickly identified as well as the good stuff. And I thought, get it out there. I'll be interviewed. Because again, I'm not hiding anything.
No.
Let's do it. And they basically just very politely said, well, no, there's no expression of interest from our end. And even if they express an interest, there's no guarantee that it will get picked for evaluation. But the fact is, because we were evaluated before, they took the time out of their day to approach us.
Yeah.
Thinking this might be a good fit based on what you've already done, as in a local authority health intervention. And they said, nah, sorry. So I'm thinking, like, right, okay. So we've got a situation where, as a council, we don't get invited into an official inquiry. Councillors are free to spout whatever they want without any kind of consequences. The opportunity arises, and all that happens is you get like a couple of interviews. So it's not like they'd be whipping current council staff off the shop floor for months on end. It's literally a quick interview. We give them a load of information, but there's no appetite to get it looked at again. And I'm completely powerless to push it through. But again, the other evaluations have been completely ignored as well. And again, going back to costs, there was one done by the public health team. So again, people might say, well, you're just marking your own homework. But again, public health team would not be able to put out garbage. They have to also be down the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, a couple of years ago, they did an evaluation and found that official government messaging around the pandemic was costing something like £1 per person reached or something. And our stuff was costing less than a penny. Again, they had to use a lot of data to make those assumptions. But broadly speaking, you know, us a penny, government other comms channels more than £1. It's like, well, why does this never get mentioned in any of these screaming councillor things and Private Eye and Essex Live, all the rest of them? Nothing ever gets. No, because there's no appetite to even look at the evaluations that were done.
But it's interesting because Aidan McGurran, who's publicly spoken out about you and about the work that you undertook, he's a Labour councillor, former editor or similar for The Mirror. You'd think he'd pick up on this good work, but I tell you what it is, it's because it's political. Had it been a Labour-led council, then it would have been a different outcome, and it would have been regaling the great work.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's quite funny in itself, because in the lead up to the general election, the official Facebook page for the county councillors and the Labour Party in Essex, they put memes up saying, paid $500,000 to a comedian, like I've got a fucking, you know, stint at jongleurs or something. But you know, so all this horrible stuff came, well, not all this sort of nastiness came up on their page, and yet more recently their page has been sharing stuff that we've been putting out on Essex's United. So obviously maybe they've had their rant and now they're just kind of getting on with things. I don't know. My biggest problem with the Liberal Democrats is that they've described my work as dubious, but they've never gone into any further information, just dubious. Councillor McCrory stood up in full council last, I think it was December, and said, you know, they were talking about an audit report or something, and said, you know, were the auditors aware that this council had paid £500,000 for dubious social media content? As in, if you could literally take a massive situation and squash it into the most misleading, context-free line possible, I think he'd win a prize for that. But well, hang on a minute, he's not gone into why the work was dubious. What work was dubious? The whole thing was dubious. My content was dubious, and yet I've spent a few weeks now going over some local Liberal Democrat pages who have been sharing the work we did. Well, you can't say, well, they didn't know it was dubious. No, the content was dubious means the content has always been dubious. I've got like a councillor, a Liberal Democrat councillor I've seen sharing Essex's United, because, you know, the page is called Essex's United now. It's changed its name to try and broaden its, you know. Well, Liberal Democrats have shared it. The work was dubious. Well, was it dubious? Maybe you should tell your councillors to stop sharing it then. But he never actually said what work was dubious. And the problem is the dubious line has gone into this leaflet. So anybody wants to work with me in the future, you'll be like, oh, hang on a minute, dubious content. Oh, no, bugger off. I was like, well, what was dubious? Come to me and say, Simon, look, in our opinion, this work was dubious. Have you got anything you want to say to that? No, just call it dubious, knowing full well that they're only criticising the council in theory so they can say what they want. So, well, what's the work dubious? Well, I mean, again, we got invited to Meta HQ March 2022 when the with the Ukraine situation kicking off, and some of the work we did, we sort of flipped it to help Ukrainian refugees coming over.
Yep.
It was basically just building a Facebook group using the same model, because that's what we do. We use the same community action model over and over again to try and do what we're doing. So the Ukraine situation said, look, come and have a peek at this group. If you're a refugee, if you want to help refugees, whatever. And Meta themselves recognised that. And then Prince Charles, obviously before he became king, Prince Charles was due to visit Meta HQ in King's Cross. And Facebook invited some group admins to actually come and present the work directly to not only Prince Charles, as it was at the time, but also some very high-level executives at Facebook. So it was like, oh, wow, this is like amazing. But again, we get invited up there. We spent 10 minutes talking to Prince Charles. I mean, he's actually quite a bit shorter than I imagined, which is quite funny. He was like, a lot shorter than me. He doesn't come across that short on the telly, but anyway.
No.
10 minutes discussing the project, the work we've done. I asked him if he'd enjoyed visiting Southend Pier, because he'd just been down to Southend. Because, you know, with the murder of David Amos, Southend becomes a city, which is absolutely the right thing to do as a tribute to him. He comes down for the ceremony and all the, you know, bits and bobs at the Civic Centre in Southend. So I hope you enjoyed your little trip down to Essex recently. This is also something we've done in Essex, you know, that's the link. And again, it was only a 10-minute thing. But Meta invited us in to present our work to Prince Charles. Well, how does that equate to being dubious?
Dubious,
It gets evaluated by NIHR. Well, how's that dubious? Public health team? No, it's dubious. The GovLab in the USA, they're part of New York University, did a piece about it. Well, how's that dubious? Again, if you want to tell me what part of my work was dubious, I'll hold my hands up and say if I agree or not. But just to say dubious, that's horrendous. And when I put this point to they call it the sort of monitoring officer at Essex County Council, saying, look, I want to take exception with a comment made in full council. Again, the general theory was, well, it was an opinion. I was like, well, it's an opinion, but it's a pretty damaging opinion.
Yeah, life-changing.
Because it's an opinion, I can't go in with sort of lawyers or anything. Because, well, no, that's just my opinion. Again, dubious. It's a judgment they've made. Okay, well, if you're not prepared to go into the judgment, that's just extreme cowardice, in my opinion. But again, councillors will use it as a political tool without possibly considering the consequences. I mean, the good thing about that complaint was, even though there was no formal consequences to it, it did push Essex County Council into updating their website to say all investigations were concluded. Because that's another thing as well, that people have managed somehow to get into private eye that the police were involved in our thing, in terms of the work we did, how it was funded, and all this stuff. You know, oh, I've been to the police, I've seen all that, I've seen things about, you know, the police have been interviewing suspects, the police have done this, the police have done that, and yet not once have Essex Police got in touch with me and said, oh, you know, or I've not had a knock on the door saying, oh, hello, we're here to talk to you about blah blah blah. So, well, how has this misconception managed to get in the press, or managed to get in private eye on the internet as well? And eventually, off that complaint I made back in December, Essex agreed to update the text on the website to make it clear all investigations were concluded. And their head of legal said to me exactly, if there was any kind of ongoing police issue, we would not be able to publish that line of text.
No.
But again, that's been ignored as well. So I might as well have been screaming into thin air.
But you see, I read somewhere, I think it was on the South Woodham site, someone's put on there that they'd been to the serious fraud office in Essex Police, and that's why I reached out to you, because actually, as you know, I was in the police for 30 years.
Yeah.
And what they were saying was absolute rubbish. I mean,
I tried finding out if that team exists, and I did my usual. I sort of phoned them up just to make a random inquiry, because obviously I didn't want to waste their time because they've got so much other stuff to be doing. Said, look, I'd just like to try and make contact with your serious fraud team. And they're like, what? You know, your serious fraud team in Chelmsford. They're like, yeah, you know, the serious fraud team who deals with serious fraud. And then I've got another friend who's also ex-police, and they said, well, serious fraud in Essex is dealt with by the Met, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds of stuff.
Yeah.
I think like, right, but and then private eye, and again, with private eye, I do have a hell of a lot of respect for them, even with everything that's happened, because if they want to say something, they'll say it because they live to get sued. And there is a lot of good stuff in the private eye universe in general. But again, you know, maybe you sort of live by the sword, die by the sword kind of thing.
Yeah.
But private eye, very early on, their wording was Essex County Council have handed a dossier to Essex Police. So I was like, oh, blimey, okay. And then over time, this January just gone, there was a follow-up to an extent, and it said, Essex Police have a whistleblower's dossier. I was like, well, hang on a minute, you know, words matter here. It's gone from Essex County Council have got the police involved to someone else has handed the dossier to Essex Police, which anyone can do. I could do it if I really wanted to. So, well, hang on a minute, I thought the council were like pushing for this. Well, and I put that point to the person at Essex I was speaking to in the legal department, and they said, well, to be fair, anything that would have happened would have literally just been, if anything would have happened, we would have handed information to Essex Police and said, this is what happened. If you think anything untoward has occurred, be our guest. That's it. And now, over time, that has been misconstrued and twisted into the police are involved, you all going down, basically. And again, that's something else that wasn't helped by the information vacuum that has occurred by the way that Essex County Council have acted and councillors have acted. I've been told it's important to get the distinction between the council and councillors.
Yeah.
The way that everybody has acted, they've basically allowed this situation to occur where there's such a lack of information to an extent. Oh, I'll just make stuff up then, that's going to fly. And that's been done to intimidate, and that's wrong. That is deeply wrong, because you're taking a bad situation and making it 10 times worse.
You are. And the collusion between members of the public who have got professional jealousy against you, and this is my opinion, and some of the councillors is unforgivable, because if it was the other way round, and we've already seen what some of their family members do and the way that they behave, but if it was the other way round, they would be very defensive.
And again, I know full well that if I went off, I mean, again, when this dubious content happened, when the leaflet happened, when bits and bobs of councils have happened in the past, I've been slightly restrained, knowing full well that it doesn't take a lot. And again, there are good reasons for this, for democratically elected representatives. They do get a certain level of police, I don't want to say police protection, because I don't want to knock anybody here, but the police have to be a certain degree far more sensitive to abuse at councillors and MPs than the other way around, which again is why when you see Lee Anderson in London talking to, what's the guy with the hat's name? Steve, Steve with the hat, Stop Brexit hat, Steve Bray, that's it. When you see Lee Anderson going toe-to-toe with him, so to speak, literally, Steve Bray makes 1 foot forward, the police are like, ugh, go away. But literally, Lee Anderson takes 1 foot forward, and they're like, ugh. But again, I get why, because there have been so many horrible things happening with, David Amos and Joe Cox. So again, that absolutely has to be the case.
Yes.
They have to have that level of protection. But the same way, I know full well that if I would have done anything even remotely silly or remotely aggressive, even in terms of a Facebook post, I would have had the police at the front door.
Of course you would.
And to an extent, that's right. But again,
you can't have it always.
The other way around.
Because Lee Anderson loves you, doesn't he? I mean, because he's...
Again, my biggest regret about going offline is that Lee Anderson called me out directly and I didn't bother responding. Which, again, it's me being a coward to an extent. Although I've explained why I went offline.
Yeah.
And the BBC put it to me, actually. They actually phoned me up to say, oh, Lee Anderson's just done this post about you. And I was like, okay. And I think, if I'd have been online, I could have just, come up with some arsey reply, and that would have been... Because, again, this stuff happens and it's over in an instant, and they basically move on to something else. But, again, maybe I should have stayed online and, made some shitty comment to him, and that would have been that. Bit of, to and fro. Again, that's life.
Yeah. And the thing is that, and this is the other thing about social media,
Yeah.
negative comments assist the algorithm as well, don't they? You know, it keeps the perpetuation of a post. So what you actually want is you want people to like, follow, share
Yeah.
positively and negatively.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
exactly it.
and that way. So I always, when somebody says, "Oh, you know, they call me some lovely, delightful name,"
Yeah, yeah.
I always thank them for their time
Yeah, absolutely.
in commenting,
But
because it
again,
assists in what I do.
I I know for that's the case, but again, at the same time now, I'm slightly more careful. And again, I used to have a decent following over on X, Twitter, whatever it's called this
Yeah,
week.
yeah,
And because I was offline for so long, that account got deactivated.
right.
I thought you had a year to reactivate. It turns out you had 30 days. So that's that. I've lost that forever, and I'm not that fussed, to be honest, all things considered. But again, when I talk about my own failings, stuff I would have done differently on that network, I used to basically. Some people call it the flying monkey syndrome, when you sort of when somebody with a large following calls out somebody with a smaller following, and all your own followers have a big pile on. And there were a couple of times when I've done that on there, thinking about it now, and I'm thinking like, "Sire, that was an arsehole thing to do. You shouldn't have done that." But again, at the time, you don't think, because again, the way it works is if I respond to somebody, everyone else who follows me sees it. I don't tell people, and if you retweet somebody, all of a sudden the flying monkeys are released and they'll go after them.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that I try not to do now to an extent, although again, sometimes it gets the better of me. But again, there were times in the past when I've done that on Twitter, because it's so easy on Twitter. One button, click, retweet, go, ha ha, thanks, mate. And all of a sudden, you don't think that maybe the person who was criticising you in the first place, maybe they're not in the best place either. And can they really handle hundreds of your own followers jumping on them and abusing them?
Yeah.
And really, that's something that I regret doing quite a bit on Twitter. That's why I'm not too fussed about losing the Twitter following, because there are people on there that I've done that to that I really shouldn't have. But again, you live and learn, to be honest.
Yeah, but they load the gun sometimes. But you're right. You know,
Yeah.
the mental health element of social media, I think,
Yeah.
is understated. I don't think there's enough concentration on it, because actually, it is bloody dangerous. It can get you down, because if you're in that world and you're looking for, you know, whatever it may be, content, and you're delivering content, you start to believe that it matters what people think about you.
Oh, Christ, yeah. And again, this is something that because again, I spent when I was going to come back to social media after a couple of months off, I kept writing a comeback post and then rewriting a comeback post. And it didn't matter how I worded it. It just made me come across as poor me, self-pitying, you know, please ignore what I've done. I'm back now. And I thought, you know what? In the end, I just thought, I'll just get my point across. Say I was having a bit of a wobble, worries me, but if you don't like it, you have to, you know, I'm past the point where I worry about what somebody 200 miles away thinks of what I've done, because at the end of the day, the only people who actually matter are obviously close family, who were pretty worried about me at one point. Again,
Yeah.
they know when I'm normal, when I'm not normal, based on the way I act and the way I don't, you know, the way that I don't want to talk in general, the way I don't want to go out, be seen. You know, they can tell when something's really badly up. And I could tell when something was really badly up. So I'm literally having like the heart palpitations and everything. And anytime my phone would go off, I'd be like, oh, what now? You know. And again, yeah, the social media and the mental health side, which is quite ironic, because we did do some kind of mental health awareness stuff as well, based in the work that we were doing with the council. And again, that's obviously been dragged on. I've seen quite a lot of lies written about that as well, in terms of, you know, why is Simon Harris, an unqualified professional, giving mental health suicide prevention sessions, when in fact I was just facilitating them. We'd get like an expert in from Provide to do it, but somebody twisted that. They saw one photo of me in this session, go, why is he giving these mental health sessions? How's he qualified? It's like, fuck's sake, I'm not qualified. I'm not doing it. I'm just getting people in to do the session.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I think, because there are whole blogs out there dedicated to slating Essex County Council. And again, the problem you have is if you respond to these people, you're legitimising them.
Yes.
Well, in fact, I think unless a journalist gets in touch with me from a reputable mainstream media source and puts an allegation to me, I don't consider the allegation valid. The problem is, though, it's online, so other people are going to read it.
Yeah.
As in, some of the stuff I've seen written about me has been absolutely horrendous, and like there's sort of 7,000-8,000 comments on one site in particular. But if a journalist in the mainstream media doesn't want to put the allegation to me because they think it's credible, why should I acknowledge these people? And the issue I've had is that with the local media, with one outlet in particular, they actually did an article legitimising one element of everything that's been going on in some of the nastier parts of the internet, like the really nasty parts. So, well, why are you doing that? As in, you're just desperate for clicks. I know I've stated the media in the past. Maybe it's your like, yeah, let's get Simon back. That's why I will not talk to a certain outlet anymore locally, because it's, to me, going down that road, it's a personal safety issue now. If you're going to start legitimising an element that have admitted using some really shitty parts of the internet and the dark web, why should I talk to you? And he's been in touch with the journalist saying, it's not clear why you won't talk to us. So fucking work it out, seriously.
Yeah.
As in the main article that went crazy viral when it all started, that Lee Anderson shared as well, obviously it gets syndicated by the Mirror. But the main article, they said, oh, Si, if you get your statement over, we'll stick it in. Well, I got the main statement over and it didn't get stuck in there. So it's literally, well, you're not putting my side of the story across. And from there, I then get another thing from the same journalist saying, well, if you could give us a response by like 2 o'clock this afternoon, that'd be great. And I'll be out working, be like, oh, I've just got to drop my whole day's work for something potentially life-changing.
Yeah.
It's like pressure. And it's a horrible intimidation tactic. And at the end, this guy then couldn't figure out why I wouldn't talk to him anymore. It's like, well, put all that together, why the hell should I? You know?
No.
But again, there are some outlets I would talk to now if they wish to.
Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, I work very closely with Sonia Watson and the BBC, Ian Puckey, the people there, and I find them very, I find them very good. Yeah, okay, they've got reporters, investigative journalists who aren't quite
that is exactly why I agreed. The reason I agreed to do that interview back in August, and again, I think a lot of it had to be cut in the end, because I think either it was for time reasons or I said stuff that I thought, oh, God, if we put that out, we're going to have grief. Possibly, I don't know. But I was there for ages. I think I was there for a good hour in the end, but they couldn't use it. But again, the reason I went back to the BBC is because very early on, the BBC were running the prankster headline and the comedian headline and the 500,000 headline. But the BBC were then very, very quick to run a follow-up story about the 500,000, saying what I was paid and what I passed on to others at Essex County Councils. So again, the BBC were very quick to do a follow-up, saying, all right, the 500,000 headline's out there, but there was another headline, Simon Harris admits he kept 367k of whatever over the 4 years. So, well, hang on a minute. At least the BBC are prepared to follow up with something that's not entirely sensationalised. And again, they were prepared to do follow-ups. And that was why, in the end, out of all the people I could have done an interview with, I went back to the BBC in Essex and said, look, all right, you're prepared to get more facts across instead of just a, shits and giggles story that's going to go viral and then move on to something else. That's why I went back to the BBC and said, fine, let's do this interview because, and yes, Sonia Watson, I was prepared to talk to them because for better or worse, at least they were prepared to kind of dig into it and try and get my side across in a way that the other outlets just couldn't give a toss about.
No, it was balanced. I mean, but 360,000 over 4 years. What do you say? It was 90 grand a year. There's people,
it's about 96 grand a year. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's people earning far more, and then you lose your tax on that. And what they don't realise is that you're working 16, 18 hours a day.
Well, again, how you define what? Again, during the height, because the payments were clustered more over the height of the pandemic. I use that as an average over the 4 year period. But again, there were some times when literally 7 days a week we'd be having something called like sit-rep meetings with loads. And again, this is what really makes me laugh. When all these people within the system in Essex, in various parts, were, oh, we didn't know what was happening. Well, hang on a minute, we're sat in daily sit-rep meetings with me and colleagues. They're there. So they can't. And again, I think a lot of people have been told just to shut up, basically, including some very high-up people in the health area and, public health. But again, I can't do anything about that. It just is what it is. But again, there were times when there'd be an emergency sit-rep called for whatever because this bit of information had come through and we'd have to discuss a response. So again, there were some long, but again, the argument is, well, hang on a minute, nurses with crap PPE are having to face the public in the most horrendous situations, put their lives and families at risk, and they weren't paid that much. And I was like, I know, and I thoroughly get that. I thoroughly get that in terms of when you talk about heroes of the pandemic, for all of the good we did, it's absolutely nothing compared to nurses not seeing their families for weeks on end because they've got to isolate just to stop other people, dying. But again, though, I didn't go to Essex County Council and say, I want this, I want that. They just said, would you be prepared to accept X amount for X work? Yeah. What am I going to say? No?
No, exactly.
No. Again, I do get the argument about, well, why were you paid all that money? But people are not prepared to look into the work that we did. They're just like, oh, it's all social media. It's bollocks. It's all social media. Nothing ever happens on there. It's all bollocks. You're an arsehole. How dare you? Blah, blah, blah. Nobody will look into it. The proof is online. And again, I'm going a bit tonto on this now, but I'm going a bit, mad. But again, the evidence is online. The Facebook page is there. You want to see the work that was done? There you go. Just scroll through Essex is United and Essex County. It's all there. Back to March 2020. You want to see the work that was there? Well, there you go. Tuck in. And the argument that I've seen thrown about is, well, hang on a minute. All these people, why were you paid X, but X was paid? Well, hang on a minute. We've got logs that show how many posts were made by Simon Harris as an admin and others. So again, you can start chatting about I was being paid a grossly inflated rate for the work I was doing compared to others. Well, hang on a minute. It's all there on record, the work that was done. And it wasn't so much that we were doing the same amount of work. I was commissioned to do this, and this. Others were commissioned to do other work in the same area. But no, I was commissioned to do an amount of work. Other people were commissioned to do another amount of work. And for them to say, oh, you were paid all this because you were like great pals with them. So that's not absolutely not what happened at all.
But who? So the likes of I can't remember the other. So you had the likes of John Mortar. He earned £100,000 out of it.
Well, again, I can see why they work with John because he's done some massively impactful stuff in the past.
Yeah.
Again, probably not well. Again, he you know about the sort of Rage Against the Machine thing. He was very much behind the social media campaign. So that was why I think the local authority was so keen to get him on board, because it's that getting people to look at stuff and take action. Because again, Rage Against the Machine got to #1 because of that call to action, the Facebook group, get people buying the record, even if you don't like the song, get it, because it's going to stop the X Factor or whatever it was getting to #1. And it worked. And it was that's basically one of the things that he's done. And so Essex County Council and all their people quite rightly said, look, we need to get involved in this, because this skill, this strategy now to get people looking at stuff is what we need. So obviously they get John on board. John gets me on board because of myself and News Network stuff. We've got mutual friends. But unfortunately, and again, obviously I respect John for what he's done, but I think other people close to him or people that know him have now believed this version of events where I've basically stolen ideas from people and just, no, he got me in. As a concept, I've now tried to do the same thing in my own style. There's not been some wholesale smash and grab of people's work and ideas. I'm really grateful that he got me involved in it. And all the amazing, people still talk about the work he's done now. People still see it on Channel 5 crop up in all these documentaries and think, well, you've got, that's a massive impact of what you've done. But to suggest that I've kind of come in, elbowed people out and gone, right, this is me now. And because of a lack of information from elsewhere, people have taken these ideas and just said, well, that must be what happened. Yeah. Nobody's been elbowed out. I did what I was asked to do. Others did what they were asked to do.
And what does the future look like?
As in, let's just let's get all these little loose ends tied up first and then see. But again, I'm just basically working for myself, social media wise, for the time being. Because again, if I get involved with anybody publicly now, they get the email from the faceless thing. Oh, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Have you seen this? So okay, so literally, it needs dealing with, because over time, if I ever have to try and work with anybody again, I'm gonna have to have this thing sorted. If it ever gets sorted, I don't know.
Okay. Well, look, Simon Harris, I'm very grateful for your time today.
Thank you.
I look forward to catching up with you again soon. First time we've actually chatted, I think. So I'm very grateful. Yeah. So anyway, listen, Simon, thank you so much for your time today, mate. I look forward to catching up with you again soon. And I've just got to work out a title for this actual episode. So,
prankster, comedian, whatever you want.
No, I wouldn't do that to you, mate. God bless you. Take care. Look after your family and look after yourself.
Bye.
All right, mate. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.